Hi students, today we have day 3 of solving trig equations, and today this interval is between 0 and 2 pi, 0 included, 2 pi excluded. So our first example, 2 sine x minus cosecant x equals 0. I notice that sine and cosecant are two different trig functions, so I'm going to start by changing this to 1 over sine. So I have 2 sine x minus 1 over sine x equals 0. Now, in order to solve this, I don't want to have that fraction, so I'm going to multiply everything by sine x to eliminate the fraction. That's going to give me 2 sine squared x minus 1 equals 0. All right, now I'm in business. Now I'm going to add 1 to both sides, so I have 2 sine squared x equals 1. We'll divide both sides by 2, so now we're down to sine squared x is equal to 1/2. We'll need to take the square root in order to get sine, so what we do to one side, we do to the opposite side. Never forget to put plus minus when you take a square root. Equals positive, negative. That's actually like the square root of 1 over the square root of 2 if we broke it up. You're not allowed to have square roots in the bottom of a fraction, so we multiply by square root of 2 over square root of 2, and we end up with sine x is equal to plus minus. We multiply straight across the top. That would give us the square root of 2 over 2. So we're asking what angles on the interval 0 to 2 pi have a sine value of positive or negative square root of 2 over 2, and we know those would be our 45-degree reference angles. So that would be pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. And there we have our answers. All right, moving on to the next problem. We've got cosine squared plus the square root of 1 minus cosine squared equals negative sine x minus 2. What a mess. So what we want to do in this problem, the first thing I notice is the square root of that. You cannot take the square root individually when you're adding or subtracting. Like your answer is not 1 minus cosine x. So we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to work with that first. We're going to change that into the square root of sine squared x equals negative sine x minus 2. All right, now we can take the square root of it because it is a monomial. It's one term. We can take the square root of something squared. So now our next line is cosine squared x plus sine x minus equals negative sine x minus 2. Okay, now my next issue with this problem is we have two different trig functions. So let's change cosine squared out into 1 minus sine squared, which is the Pythagorean identity, plus sine x equals negative sine x minus 2. Okay, now I want to bring everything to one side. I'm going to have to factor. I know I'm going to have to factor because I have a sine squared. Let's shift everything over to the right side. So let's subtract 1 from both sides. Let's add sine squared to both sides. And let's subtract sine x. from both sides. So that would give me 0 equals sine squared minus 2 sine x minus 3. Okay, now we're going to factor the right-hand side. So what times what will give us sine squared? That would have to be sine x times sine x. Two numbers that multiply together to give me a -3. That could be -3 times a +1. Now remember, these outside, inside, and FOIL have to give me -2 sine x. So if I check it, outside gives me +1 sine x. Inside times inside gives me -3 sine x. And together that gives me -2 sine x. So that is factored correctly. Now we take our factors and we set our factors equal to 0. So we'd have sine x minus 3 is equal to 0, and we'd have sine x plus 1 is equal to 0. So back to the first one, we would add 3 to both sides. So that's sine x is equal to 3. No angle has a sine value of 3 on the interval 0 to 2 pi, so that one's a wash. Over here, we'll subtract 1. So now we're down to sine x is equal to -1. So what angles have a sine value of -1? There's only one, and that's 3 pi over 2, which is 270. And that is our only answer on the interval 0 to 2 pi. Have a great day, guys.